Thunder Bay is blessed with one of the world's greatest natural harbors. Over the years, our forefathers have improved upon nature's gift, building the necessary industrial infrastructure that made us the busiest grain port in the world. Grain arrived from Western Canada, millions upon millions of bushels. And thousands of ships carried that grain to hungry people around the world. Thunder Bay Harbor was a multi-billion-dollar economic engine, creating enormous benefit for our city. We assumed that the transportation cycle would keep repeating itself like some unstoppable dynamo, spinning jobs and economic benefits forever. It almost seemed to be our divine birthright. Recently, however, we have seen that these assumptions were wrong. Nothing lasts forever. We have been dethroned as the world's busiest grain port. Canadian wheat often finds its way to other terminals, bypassing Thunder Bay altogether. What would happen to Thunder Bay if the train stopped coming? What would happen if our huge concrete elevators were emptied for the very last time, abandoned like giant whitewashed tombs, memorials to glory days long since forgotten? What if the ships of the world never again navigated the waters guarded by the sleeping giant? Will there be jobs in the transportation industry for our children? Such questions used to seem unthinkable, but in today's harsh economic climate, they're not. The world has changed. Today, the port of Thunder Bay is facing tremendous challenges, challenges that threaten our very existence as a transportation terminal.
I guess the fix is the issue of a port that doesn't see the kind of activity that it once did from a shipping standpoint, I guess, from a rail standpoint, from an elevator activity standpoint. How did we get into this fix? I think there's many reasons how we got here. A lot of it is to do with worldwide shift of markets, government-imposed costs domestically, subsidies that have sometimes worked against us rather than for us. These are issues that I think the whole city of Thunder Bay has to think about.
Let's face it, it is a changing world market out there. It's changing very rapidly, and where our biggest customer used to be the former Soviet Union with 4 million tons, now the biggest customer for Canadian wheat takes 1 million tons of grain a year. And the biggest customer 2 years ago was probably the United States. And it was probably our 10th largest customer 5 years ago.
Well, it's a combination of various factors, and without really trying to lay blame here and there, I think that the marketplace is certainly one aspect of it. The other things that would go along with that would be restructuring and technological change. One time it was really a much more labor-intensive industry. With technological change, you've seen control rooms. We've seen departments where you might have 30 people. They can operate with 2. You've seen utilization of rail cars versus more labor-intensive box cars. All these have factored into a restructuring at the port. The downsizing really started in the port in 1984. We hadn't seen an adjustment committee on the waterfront till basically 1992, and that was after basically 1,000 jobs went by the wayside. Right.
The issue boils down from a marketing standpoint to the cost alternatives and getting that product to the customer. And that's an issue for Thunder Bay is cost. The cost of moving the product from the country to Thunder Bay through the St. Lawrence system to the customer.
And the competitive nature of markets today is such that we're not going to be able to afford, any of us, to pay those costs. Mm-hmm. I think markets ultimately are going to determine how grain flows. You're going to see a redirection of some of the traffic that might normally have come out this way into the United States, for example. And there, we honestly believe that the customers are going to demand the shortest, fastest route for the grain to get to them. And in most cases, given that the grain originates well over 400 miles from Thunder Bay, that the rail direct route into the United States will be the one that is most frequently used to serve those markets.
As we can see, some of the factors affecting us here in Thunder Bay are beyond our direct control. We are a part of a national, even a global transportation system with ebbs and flows and policy changes that have a tremendous impact upon our port. Significant costs are often imposed from the outside. Added to this, an aging system has made the entire Canadian grain industry less competitive.
Well, it starts in the country. And in the country today, we have an elevator system and a branch line system that was literally built for the horse and buggy age. There are over 8,000 miles of railway track in the prairie, which is enough to literally stretch halfway around the world. And I don't exaggerate when I say that the amount of track that has come out is so small that we could literally say we're still in the horse and buggy age. So the first thing that you have to see, in my view, if we're going to take a significant step forward, is construction of larger inland elevators, high throughput elevators, capable of loading cars in 25 and 50 and 100 car blocks, combined with a consolidated branch line system. One other subject I want to raise, there's only enough room for one railway in eastern Canada, or two railways operating half the amount of track that is there today. And that's not popular in Northern Ontario. I know that there was a lot of opposition to the CPC and merger discussions. But unless that kind of thing happens, railways are not going to have the money to invest in the business to make grain movement and any movement of any other commodity really work for the customer. And he ultimately calls the tune.
We can't have change in Western Canada in isolation of the cost factors on the seaway. And so there is an exercise going on now to analyze the cost of the seaway, which go beyond the direct costs that I control with respect to actual ship owning and ship operating. There are government legislated costs that have to do with seaway, Coast Guard, pilotage, ports. That's being analyzed now. That has to happen to look at cutting out any services that aren't required within that those various government-controlled agencies or authorities. That the seaway system also has to undergo a tremendous amount of change as well to really just provide the essential service and nothing more than that to allow ships to pass through the system. By way of example, a ship loads grain in Thunder Bay, it sails from here to Montreal. To get from here to Montreal, it crosses Lake Superior. The captain takes that ship through the St. Mary's River, across Lake Huron, down St. Clair River, transits the Welland Canal, transits the American Narrow, some of the narrowest passageways on the whole system, fairly heavy currents. The ship arrives at St. Lambert Lock in Montreal, which is the last lock of the St. Lawrence Seaway system, and a pilot comes on board to take that ship from the St. Lambert Lock across to 1 hour shift over to the elevator. That's a legislated cost that in that particular instance is not required, is not necessary. Particularly at a time now when we are experiencing deregulation, we are being told by the Western farmer that he is looking at every cost and he is looking at every potential direction for the flow of his product to market, and we're competing for that service.
So what we're talking about here today is how do we remain competitive or get more competitive, because the competition isn't necessarily in Canada, it's globally. And so someone else will steal the Canadian business if we're not competitive, either east, west, or south. So yes, we do make the decisions, and those decisions are made on customer requirements as well as the economics of moving that product to that customer.
Over the past few years, taxes can run as high as 18 or 20% of that fixed tariff that we were able to get for the grain that we put through the elevator. And it is a significant factor for all of the terminals down here, and it's been an issue we've been, the Association of Elevators has been addressing for years. And when you consider that to be your single largest cost item, it is one area where we could get assistance from the city of Thunder Bay or the municipality in terms of cost reductions. The municipality or the city of Thunder Bay has to also look at us as partners with them, because the alternative is no tax revenue. We're not here anymore as terminal elevators.
Really, the Port of Thunder Bay is one player in a larger grain transportation and handling system that is in competition with our counterparts just south of us across the U.S. border. As railways, we pay 2.5 times more in tax than we would if we were operating in the United States. And the biggest difference of all is on diesel fuel tax. Our fuel taxes are 10 times higher than they are in the United States. We can buy fuel in Chicago for less than we pay in fuel taxes in Canada. The markets are becoming more competitive for grain, for transportation. If we get some kind of tax break, the competition in those markets will see the benefits of that shared with our customers. That will benefit, in turn, grain movement into Thunder Bay.
What are the players in the grain handling and transportation industry doing to overcome these challenges? What solutions and innovations are waiting to be discovered that will lead to the salvation of the Port of Thunder Bay?
Flexibility is already here, maybe not to the fullest extent that the company was like, but certainly we've produced shifts where there's unloading of grain cars. If a boat comes in, a person would go and start loading the boat when it came in. The work hours may be somewhat restricted, but certainly that's an item that even that was dealt with. We had an oats movement last year that a specific customer came in. It was competing against, I guess, the rail movement, and we were actually able to provide the flexibility necessary to allow that person to come in, move products through the port, and it resulted in a direct callback of about 25 employees had been laid off for over a 24-month period. And we're going to have to keep looking at that area if, in fact, we want to remain competitive, i.e. Loading the boat till it's finished rather than waiting till morning to finish the last part of the load so it can start sailing, it can become more efficient, it can get the grain into the customer in time. All those things factor into keeping us in business. Flexibility versus no job, I think the answer is quite simple. If we wouldn't have grasped technological change a whole lot of years ago, we wouldn't have been able to survive up to this point. The way technology has evolved, it enhances the job. It's nothing to be fearful of. You have to grasp it. It makes you more efficient. It makes the job easier in a lot of cases. It makes it less labor intensive. Not necessarily does it cost you a job, it creates different type of jobs. If it is happening, then you've got to be innovative to find ways to address the impact that's having on those that are going to have a net effect. And if that's job loss, you have to have adjustment programs. There's all sorts of innovative ways to deal with the implementation of new technology. Be competitive, be efficient. A person has to have transferable skills. Labor's perspectives on this whole issue is that we don't want to be part of the problem. We can guarantee that we want to be part of the solution.
And I think what we all need to do is get regulation and outdated legislation behind us and get on with actually getting the job done for our customers, because that is what's going to be the source of our employment. I also think, if thinking as a railroader, that people who work here are going to want to get their kicks from doing their jobs differently. For example, Winnipeg, where I live, is 400 miles away. We change crews twice between Thunder Bay and Winnipeg, once in Ignace, once in Kenora. And a guy who wants to see a really good long-term secure future in our business moving grain into this port, he's going to want to get his kicks, I think, from highballing a train right from Winnipeg into Thunder Bay. And you can do it with today's technology, and you can do it in 8 hours. That's a great piece of track we got between Winnipeg and Thunder Bay. Markets today are forcing us to change, and we're going to have to come to grips with that.
Seen a significant shift to the growing of these types of crops to give farmers more flexibility in Western Canada, and the markets for those crops are primarily, best served by going east through Thunder Bay. There's certainly been more saltwater vessels come, up to the lakehead in the past year than there have been in prior years, and a lot of the commodities they are handling are commodities that are going into non-traditional markets with specialty crops, peas, lentils, mustard seed, and they tend to be a higher value crop.
As a marketing agency, what we've had to do is go out and beat the bushes and find new markets for that grain. Those areas happen to be Eastern and Western Europe, and they continue to be those areas. Africa and Latin America to some degree. Thunder Bay, in combination with the Seaway, gives us a lot of flexibility to service our customers.
What's the customer requirement? The customer's requirement, and it is he wants the product when he wants it. You know, when you want to pick up a gallon of milk for breakfast, you know, you're going to go to the place that can give you that type of service. And cost is not so much a factor at that point in time. So I think improving upon what we're good at doing already, and that's giving the customer the product that he wants when he wants it. And I think you have to look at value and where we add value. And as a Canadian industry, we've been very good at adding value to the product as we move it along. And you know, the protein levels, our segregations, the blending capabilities that we have in Thunder Bay, they're not available in the U.S. system at this point in time. So it's a niche for us, and so we can't just compare costs. We have to compare, you know, what value we're adding for the costs that we're getting.
As we approach the 21st century, it seems that the only thing certain is change. Competition will not cease. We must embrace new technology and innovations if we hope to continue to play a role in the transportation industry.
But the work we've done suggests that there's going to be, and the cheapest way to move grain for export position for as long as I'm likely to be working, is going to be for this railway to bring grain to the Port of Thunder Bay to be loaded on a ship. And we just think that's going to be a big part of our future and of this port.
And when I look at the international marketplace, the Thunder Bay does have a place to service those customers. The Canadian Wheat Board, the farmers of Western Canada need Thunder Bay, and as long as the port and this corridor remains competitive, I have a lot of confidence that we'll meet the challenge.
I believe that we're into exciting, challenging times in our business. We're codependent in this business, and we have to work hard to meet the challenges of the changing times. But there is a way to work together here. There's a way to take this system and make it work as one, with all of us benefiting from it. That there are opportunities here for entrepreneurs to make a better system and to capitalize on efficiencies that we can create and get something a return on. But Thunder Bay is a big port. It is essentially a paid-for port. There probably has to be upgrading done, but there has to be a reason to do that. People have to see a reason to recapitalize their infrastructure, put money into it.
It's up to the industry here to meet the challenge. You know it's real, you know you have to get focused, you know what you're up against, you know what your competitor is, and it's a tough competitor. You've got to come down to the brass tacks and get all the stakeholders together and develop a strategic plan that's interfaced, like you say.
How we respond to the challenges facing us today and tomorrow will determine the future of the Port of Thunder Bay.